Welcome to the Generation Open podcast with LDR21, a podcast about workplace culture and leadership that leads to transparency and an open organization. Today, we jump back into our conversation about talent acquisition with Aaron Atkins. Here's your host, the founder and CEO of LDR21, Jen Kelchner.
I think that's
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a goal of mine as well, is to see where those walls are completely down and it's no longer a them versus us mentality, no matter what bucket you're trying to break through or box, but it really is about all of us being in and taking it past awareness and actually creating a solution of it is no more.
Right. But as you know, as someone that's been in the game, a while, like you've seen this, you've worked in large organizations, that change, that paradigm shift, while elementary in nature, is extraordinarily difficult. And it requires, I think some people raising their hand, stepping up and taking that risk. And then, to Gila's point, she was very nervous about even creating the Women's Leadership Network. She was afraid to ask. And the response was, well, of course, go for it. Why would you even hesitate? But again, that cultural change is a fair amount of work. It can be some pretty honest, pretty difficult discussions. But to your point, open cultures, open organizations need to be comfortable having those conversations, and they need to encourage them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that inclusivity in and of itself is really a big part of how everything else works together. It's an integral part for a healthy ecosystem, for a healthy culture, a healthy workplace, as well as a place that creates a space for people to do their best work. So I'm applaud you guys for that.
and it kind of comes back, Jen, to the why. It's not like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? The most important question is, well, why are you doing this?
Right.
So, why are we starting affinity groups, or why do we seek diverse thought, or why do we seek diverse leaders? It's because we want to make an impact. We want to see our efforts come to fruition versus, well, what are you doing today? It's kind of, again, it's that internal paradigm shift of what are we doing and why are we doing this? These are big questions. While elementary in nature, they're kind of simple questions, but they're a lot of work, but they lead to amazing results.
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to, isn't your motto based around doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Kind of your mission.
One of our core values is to do what is right always. And again, that can be having difficult conversations where if it's, hey, we're working with client X and they don't represent our values, or they're putting our consultants in an area that is not good for their growth and our brand development, then we'll kindly kind of go the other way. Or if it is, identifying an individual that brings a new tool to the table that we don't have to just do what is right. Again, it's a very simple rule. Our general manager, our leader here of the LA market, guy by the name of Rick Rankin. Rick has, we have these great 10 rules, 10 core values, but his kind of 11th core value is no stupid rules. So just keep it simple, just kind of, just do things that are simple and just do what is right, and it'll all work itself out.
Absolutely. I love that. I think we could use more of that in our organizations, which is definitely, kind of the thought leadership I'm wanting to bring to the space and piggyback off of, or all of us together collectively making larger strides and creating a ripple effect to, help others get to that place of standing up, doing the hard things, and making a difference, making a bigger impact.
And to your point, how can we as leaders empower our folks to stand up? So that's a whole other thing. Like, what tools are we giving our people to give them the strength and the courage to make a stand and then to support them subsequently?
Absolutely. Which kind of actually naturally segues into my next question, which is really about our generational challenges we see. So, for me, one thing that I like to talk about with folks is I think it's important to understand very clearly what the differences are between the four groups that are in the workplace together. Just, even at the most basic level, what are our influencers? What's driving us to behave the way we are, or seek out the things we are seeking, in terms of, I think it goes well beyond, how to attract and retain and engage an individual, but to understand even maybe some of the shaping that we've had that helps us think the way that we think. So when we look at that, I know there have got to be a host of challenges with recruiting millennials and as well. Unfortunately, and I'm going to step out for a second. Millennials get a bad rap we all know the one, and I think there's like maybe a dozen of them globally that exist that fit the overarching stereotype that we all go back to, or that, throws the rest of the generation under the bus. I personally know one or two of them. But
I know more than one or two, but yes, please continue.
I think there's a few, but, I try to remind people that, hey, every cohort group has a bad stereotype. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and we had a host of stereotypes about being lazy and never being able to amount to anything. And, some of us have gone on to do decent things. So, I think when we move past how we tend to think about a group and really start thinking about this whole piece of an organization, this ecosystem being different. And I'm going to kind of change my question that I was going to pose to you, because I'm thinking about what you said before with inclusivity and really breaking everything down. I think, isn't there a way generationally that we as organizations and leaders, no matter the organization or industry, can begin to break down those walls and say, yes, let's understand each other as people. But again, let's get away from the them versus us. This is everybody in here. And helping us to, adopt practices that help us get there faster and create better work environments. So that was my statement. To that, the question then is, I got on my soapbox, sorry. With millennials and Gen Z that we are just now starting to enter the workspace, what are some of the things that we're starting to think about putting into place to eliminate some of those challenges in attracting and retaining them?
Yeah, so there's a leader in our organization, Sharon Ott. Sharon was a 20-year Army officer and veteran there, and she's an organizational change consultant out of our Phoenix office for a couple of years. She's now actually been kind of transitioned over to be our global inclusion and diversity leader. So she wrote a great white paper a couple of months ago about this very topic, about identifying those kind of the four major groups, the boomers, Gen X, millennials, and the Z now as well, about how to kind of bring people together. But again, it kind of comes back to what your earlier point about breaking down those walls. Millennials have a very different learning and training and leadership mentality than the boomers do. Or, Gen Xers, which tend to be kind of more independent contributors. This is how we do it. It's done our way and we get it done. Versus millennials are like, well, how do we feel about it?
Right.
So it's a very different mindset, but it's, again, to their point, it's about being able to put everybody into a room to kind of, get naked, for lack of a better word, and to have an open discourse. So, change, as tends to be slow in organizations, but, how are we kind of coaching our leaders internally and subsequently to our clients to take those bold steps and to have those honest conversations? Something that we've done here is we actually brought in, we have a woman that we hired a couple of years ago who was at Target for many years. Her name is Amanda Barker. She is kind of now, while she was hired as an organizational change consultant, she's now our talent management director. So we have all of these great roles. I think you and I know this role from way back in the summer, Jen. But she's kind of bringing together our folks, I'd say monthly, if not bi-monthly, to have open discourses. If it is doing something like, we want training around being better public speakers, which a 25-year-old might want or a 45-year-old might want. So how do we bring people together with the same common goal? Or it's leading kind of think tank exercises and leadership workshops about how do we give proper feedback, or how do we not climb the ladder of influence? Because while individuals are maybe born in a different year, in a different time, different place, we're all human at the end of the day. We all want to have the same thing done. So it kind of comes back to what Amanda, as well as Sharon, and obviously your organization is doing as well, is how do we break down those walls, and how do we start having that conversation where, the millennials and Gen Zers are much more digitally focused. They're looking for constant feedback. They're looking to do things from a team-oriented perspective. They don't want to hear, hey, Aaron, do this, or hey, Mike, do that. They want to have a team-based approach. So how are we being open in our communication styles to have direct discourse with these younger generations, but also being cognizant of maybe someone from a previous generation to make sure that everybody is moving in the right direction. But it's a very, very prevalent topic that we're facing internally, and we're putting in a lot of solutions there, but also with our clients.
Do you guys feel, or from your position and some of the studies that you're mentioning in this white paper, Do you think that collectively across the industry that we're doing a good job at starting to prepare for more millennials, not only being in leadership, but we know by 2025 that 75% of our workforce will be millennial. And so my concern is with 8 years to go to that number, we're behind. I know, I hate thinking about it that way, but we're really behind the 8 ball, I think, in business in preparing the workplace for being able to do that effectively.
Yeah.
But my concern is we're either those millennials will end up not having been mentored properly to lead appropriately, to fill the gaps that they currently have, and or they're going to be inheriting a mess.
Well, and I'll be honest. I mean, there are times like there's times on campus hiring, and you meet a 22-year-old that has an entrepreneurship degree, and they're like, okay, where's my vice president office, corner office, and where's my BMW? It's like, okay, let's pump the brakes. Like, let's take it down a notch. But you have those folks like that. Again, we all know a millennial or two that's done that. But then again, some of them have done that. I mean, I've got a childhood friend that's a billionaire. He started a company like that, and he's the traditional millennial that doesn't think, from a logistics perspective. He thinks about outside this, he thinks outside the box, and he's seen incredible success. But to your point, if 8 years from now, 75% of the workforce is millennials, there's a risk from a brain drain perspective of folks that have been here for 20, 30, 40 years that know the systems, that know the people, that know the processes, that know how to get things done. If they leave and we have an amazing party and we send them on their way and they go for retirement, well, now what? So what are we doing to alleviate that risk of that brain drain? So to your point, I think mentorship is something that is extraordinarily valuable. Maybe it's identifying a young up-and-coming millennial and then having them either mentor someone that is similar to them or also someone that's a different challenge so they can learn to come together. I have 2 mentors here. One of them is they're both on the Gen Xer side. I think they're approaching the boomer side as well, but I really value what they've done. I value their experience, and they give me honest discourse. But I also kind of take it with my own spin, because that's kind of who I am as an individual. A major thing that we're seeing also, it is something that we're attempting to do, is to move away almost from a mentor towards a coach, because the mentor says, hey, Jen, I did it this way. You should do it do it this way as well. You'll see success. And there's certainly value to that. But that coach mindset is, how are we doing this together? What kind of tools am I giving you, Jen, or Jen, you're giving me, so that you can be successful in your own right? And so when we look at, the millennial generation coming in, and even more so beyond that, we're starting to see the 22-year-olds coming out of schools that are active in the workforce. What systems, what trainings, what programs do we have in play that are identifying their needs, from collaboration, from flexible workforce arrangements to community service, that allow them to make an impact? Because millennials, more than their generation, they value experiences. So what are we doing to kind of create that experience for them from a recruiting perspective, from a professional perspective, and from a life perspective? I think we're in a very cutting edge firm, Slalom, but I think like every other company, we might be a little bit behind the 8 ball, because, to your point, 8 years from now, that's not a couple of minutes, that's pretty close. And, it's something that we need to identify and continue to focus on.
Absolutely. It's scary. My driver's license will expire by the time 75% of millennials are in. I mean, it's like when you put it in a normal term, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's easy to say, because I've done it many times in my career. You think of a far off date, like a 2025, and it sounds so futuristic. And it's not that, no, it's literally, within the next 10 years. So it's crazy to think about. But what are some of the things then, talking about some of the generational changes, the things that people could implement immediately in their system that helps, kind of encourage them that, I'm trying to find the right word here. It's really more encouraging that space that helps millennials and other folks feel comfortable. So like one of those is kind of our flexibility. We talk about life balance. Which, we just talked about. Really, life balance is a myth. One, because it shouldn't be work and life. It is life. And I personally think that it's a myth because it doesn't really exist. We all kind of have a flow that we step in to do our best work. And So it's not about an 8 to 5 balance. But when we look at, I think a lot of companies have been fearful of implementing things around remote work or flexible schedules. And I think Slalom's had a considerable amount of success by implementing this. Yes.
Yeah, we have. So let's kind of so if we kind of talk about, like, I'm not going to use the term WL balance because I'm trying to get rid of it from my lexicon. But if you look kind of at flexible work schedules, that's something that, I think we do a very good job of doing and implementing, with a caveat that it obviously depends on our client. So there are certainly some investment banking and financial services clients that want our guys and gals there, suited and booted, suit and tie from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And there are some clients, I know that you have a consulting background, you've been there.
Yeah.
And then there are others where, there's a significant pharmaceutical client that we have here in Los Angeles that is over an hour each way from any of our folks. So we've actually worked in contractually some language with our clients to say that we need to have flexibility. So if it is maybe our folks are on site 2 weeks out of an 8-week engagement, and the other 6 weeks they're working in their offices or they're working remotely, to give them that flexibility. Slalom is certainly an outputs-based company. If you can do your job in 30 hours a week, wonderful. Go surfing, go to Coachella, go have fun with your friends and family. That's great. We care about the output. That older, 9 to 5 punch the clock mentality is not around anymore, not only within our firm, but in other organizations as well. That's just something we're moving towards. There are plenty of great examples of where we try to have flexibility to understand our individual strengths and allow them to execute upon it. So there's a woman that's actually part of my talent team. She's building out a bunch of different services. Flat out, she's a night owl. She just is, whereas I'm a morning person. I'm here at 7:30 in the morning. I like that, just kind of who I am as an individual. It was a bit of a tough transition for a little bit because I wanted to see her in the morning, to see her work. We had an honest discussion, and it made more sense for her to come in at 9:30 versus 7:30. And she stays a little later, but I go a little earlier. And in having that open discussion, she had a great quarter last year, made a bunch of amazing hires. But again, it's being open enough and bold enough to have a new level of conversation. There was another woman that we brought in who's a mother of 2. Her husband is a startup guy and is doing a bunch of great stuff, and he's all over the place helping launch a new product. She also has a bit of a startup background, but she's a senior leader in an organization, and she has 2 young children. They're 10, and she wants to be able to take her son and daughter to school or pick them up from swim practice at the end of the day. So what are we doing to kind of give her that balance? Because to your point, life is omnipresent. It's not just work and life. There is no balance. It is a myth. It's, life is always going on. So what are we doing to kind of best manage our time?
And I think I would argue that productivity, when it's fostered correctly in a culture and the structure and processes are there and it's very, very clearly communicated, I would argue that the productivity is actually higher for most individuals that have that place to operate when it works best for them. Because I'm like it's changed where I work better in the morning, and by the afternoon, my analytical part of my brain turns off and I become more social. And so in the afternoon's better time for me to do meetings and conversations. Right. So knowing that my productivity is much higher at the beginning of the day and my output's better, my quality's better because I'm doing it when I personally do better.
And again, that's having an organization that is open and that is willing to have that discussion, as opposed to jobs at 9, you're out at 5. I mean, this isn't the Don Draper Mad Men world anymore. Right. That's not what we're doing. Yeah. So yeah. So what are we as managers and leaders in this space of talent and people? How are we facilitating those conversations? And it's sometimes it might be swallowing the humble pill. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it might be being open to getting feedback. Mm-hmm. So one of your earlier questions was actually around, what are some of the things that we're doing from a millennial perspective to change our organization given a new influx of talent? Right. Something that we did about a year ago is we've moved away from annual reviews on January 1st of every single person, and you check the box and, Jen did this, Aaron didn't do that. So we're attempting to move away from that to a much more iterative process. And we're looking to create an organization where, say you and I just did something together and I want to give you feedback. You're willing and able to take it, but I'm also empowered to give it to you.
Right.
As opposed to saying that once a year formal annual feedback, how are we growing in an iterative fashion, in an agile fashion, where we're always looking to kind of stay on the cutting edge. I know that Zappos has done some really great stuff in that space as well. Some of our larger firms, we're seeing that we're moving towards that too. That when it comes to giving feedback, moving more towards an organization where we value that on a constant basis versus January 1 of year X. It's just moving towards more of that open type of company where we want feedback and we want to make an impact.
Well, I think it's super important. One thing I always remember from my years at the Big Four was my coworkers were often extremely frustrated because they'd have a great year. They felt like they had delivered for their clients. And yet, unfortunately, when the mid-year year-end came around, no matter what good was said, they were still, unfortunately, kind of being dropped into the bell curve, as it were. Mm-hmm. And, only one or two people were allowed to kind of become top performers. So you would hear the conversations after year-end reviews why does it matter? Why do I care? Why do I give my best if there is no way to actually, get the appropriate feedback and be able to realize that from a merit standpoint. And so I think moving away from those models and having the real-time feedback and having the opportunity to do better in our performance and to give better innovative solutions to clients, I think it will, in the long run, show that it has a huge return on investment by switching those models over.
Certainly. Again, that goes back to the coaching thing. I mean, if you've ever played sports, like if you strike out, you want your coach to say, hey, do this or put your shoulder in here. Like, look at your positioning versus 3 months from now, like, oh, Aaron, you struck out. That wasn't good. How are you changing? How are you becoming better if you get feedback once, maybe twice a year? You're not staying on the cutting edge. So, but again, this is more of a new kind of thinking from an organizational perspective. And some organizations are ahead of the curve, some are behind, but I think we're moving more in that direction of iterative feedback.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, we'd like a little bit of your insight into maybe some trends that we see or hoping to see in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So, I don't know if this is the right place to kind of start talking about rate curves a while and the singularity and how eventually AI is going to kind of come into recruiting. I don't think we're there in the next 6 months, but
it's on the way though. I'm reading about it.
Mark Cuban always talks about it. If we're seeing it in manufacturing, it's only a matter of time before it spreads to other parts of the economy. But we'll next podcast we'll talk
there
about
we
that.
Go,
We'll dig in there. But I think kind of a couple of those big keys when looking at trends, obviously, as it has significantly moved away from products to services. As this kind of goes back, what are we looking for in the next level of talent? There's certainly a ton of value in a certain large part of the economy in that product group still, but most of the growth has come from a services perspective. So how are we educating and training our new folks to move towards there? When it comes to iterative feedback, when it comes more towards the coach versus the mentor, this all kind of comes back to a build versus buy mentality. Mm-hmm. So some organizations are large enough that they can go and buy. They can go acquire a new company, or they can go, hire a bunch of people in the sense that we're going to build we're going to buy these folks and they're going to absorb into organization. Slalom is much more of the build mentality of how do we identify the right people with the right capabilities and then train them to have the right skill sets. So it's moving more towards that training and development of what are we doing as an organization to identify and hire the kids out of school recently or the recent MBAs, or maybe even folks that have been in a certain industry for 10 years, but they're looking to pivot into something new. So what are organizations doing to build their next level of talent? That's something that it is definitely coming that we're seeing. I can give you a real world example. If we're looking in the technical space, Salesforce.com is the hottest tool set in the world right now. If you can spell Salesforce.com, you're basically going to get a job. But when we look at like specifically from a Slalom perspective, our demand is 5x the supply. Wow. So we're losing money because we don't have the right amount and the right number of folks. So what are we doing as an organization to build those people. So again, it kind of comes back to training. So whenever there's someone that we see that's on the bench, which means they're not billing on a client, they got a little bit of downtime, what are we doing in that 2 weeks between projects to train them up on a new skill? So that's one example of what we're doing here at Slalom, but other organizations are doing the same thing. So we're kind of creating that utility player that can kind of be cross-functional across a wide variety of solutions and services, which just only increases their value from a market perspective.
I'm writing that down because I really like that, creating the utility player.
Yeah.
I think it's very catchy. Well, and it really speaks to, again, we think about organizations been behind the curve on, I've talked to them before about learning and development and, coaching programs that would be internal. And I think, I go on a limb and kind of make a little bit of a blanket statement, but I think most of the older generation that's still in leadership tends to shy away from it because their focus has always been in business, focusing on that bottom line and what are we doing to generate the revenue. And so these seem to be more, sometimes are more soft skills. Not just that, obviously I think there's a mix here of technical and soft, but I think there are a lot of organizations been behind the curve on getting up to speed and adopting those sorts of practices. So it's definitely one way that an organization could start is by implementing similar things. Well, Aaron, you have been full of insight today. I mean, it has been amazing. And I will have to have you back again so we can kind of dig into AI and other things we think that are coming in the not so distant future.
Anytime, Jen.
It'd be great. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great to talk.
We'd like to send a very special thank you to Aaron Atkins from Slalom Consulting for joining us to discuss intentionality and talent acquisition. Thanks for listening to the Generation Open podcast with LDR21. If you would like to find out more about how to improve the health of your organization or would like information on our Rapid Change program, go to our website, LDR21.com. That's LDR21.com.